Hello, this is David from davidcliveprice.com, and this is the podcast edition of this week's Easy number 24, Secrets to Chinese Business Negotiations. As business becomes increasingly globalized, cultural intelligence and intercultural competence is becoming an essential strategic tool for cross-border relationship and team building, targeted branding and marketing, risk navigation, and successful negotiations. In this series of intercultural challenges, I look at each of these aspects in turn, the theme this time being relationships and negotiations, because they are the bedrock of how companies operate across borders and can have a significant impact on your bottom line. A Westerner's approach to negotiation is generally based on logical, sequential steps. For most Chinese, however, and in many other Asian cultures, negotiation consists of a series of isolated subjects that are finally all connected together based on the value of the total deal. This approach requires persistence and can be a powerful means for Chinese negotiators to secure the point they are seeking, or at least a compromise, at the very last moment, and even after the negotiations have been completed and the contract signed. That is perhaps the first, very surprising element of Chinese business negotiation for the Western business person to factor into a strategic negotiating plan. And you must have such a plan before you begin negotiations, or indeed before you launch into business in China in general. The time factor. The Guangxi, or connection system, means that the preparation time needed to develop a suitable network of relationships in China is very long and exhausting. But without developing such a network, your negotiations are often doomed to fail. Many Western business people in China complain that the Chinese don't seem to have the same concept of time as we do in the West, or any sense of urgency. And this is largely because the Chinese do not view business as being transactions-based, a sequence of binding contracts that develop a strong business partnership, but rather in terms of the total value of the relationship in the long term. In other words, the Chinese negotiate the relationship, not the contract. The Chinese view is that if you're still talking, you're still negotiating. This means that Western businesses should not only be prepared to play the negotiating game, but they should also devise a strategic plan that takes the to and fro of relationships into account. Always have more to request from the relationship, as the Chinese do, and always have fresh variables to put on the table. If you focus entirely on achieving one set of goals, it is likely that you will lose out over the extended time frame. Many Western companies still think that negotiations in China can be carried out either over the phone or the internet, as they are in their own countries, or at the very most with a quick fly-in and out visit prepared by some local partner or distributor or agent on the ground. However, this style of business is almost unknown in China, except perhaps for digital business or online retailing. But even these companies and entrepreneurs must build the personal relationship over time. The requirement for face-to-face meetings extends the time for negotiations, the need for translation, as well as the time necessary to get to know your potential partner. China is a marathon, not a 100-meter dash, and your negotiations are likely to take place over a much longer period of time than in the West. I'd love to hear from you if you have tips or comments about doing business in China or in other parts of Asia. You can leave them at my blog www.davidcliveprice.com/blog. And of course, please subscribe if you want more on-the-ground intel like this. Just add yourself to the subscription box on www.davidcliveprice.com, and you can also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.